Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. One of the most notable couples in all of comics is Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Meeting as teenage superheroes, becoming leaders of the X-Men, and courting for the longest time before finally getting married. Even Jean dying isn't necessarily a guarantee to keep them separated. Hey, has anyone asked Nightcrawler how that whole "till death do us part" works for them? While their family tree is a bit small, it is something wacky. Most famously, they have a son who was raised in the future, Cable, though technically his biological mother is Madeline Pryor, Jean's clone. But I sometimes forget they have another child, Rachel Ann Summers. She's actually from the alternate timeline first seen in Days of Future Past, a reality where the Phoenix didn't replace Jean, but bonded with her. This enabled Rachel to not only inherit her mom's psionic abilities, but wield the Phoenix Force, and taking on the mantle when she first found herself in the 616 timeline. This is all necessary to set up for today's review, since I'm taking issue with the 4-part tale, The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, where our superpowered power couple find themselves in a different time and different other stuff. Written by Scott Lobdell with art by Gene Ha, Al Vey, and Kevin Somers, let's see if this story makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. Number 1's cover is a bit on the simple side. Our title heroes against a black backdrop, a funky-looking laser cannon from out of nowhere, and they're both wearing blue, form-fitting catsuits. Because they're the kind of couple that thinks it's cute to wear matching outfits and have their faces obscured by shadows. We open to Jean strapped to strange armored leggings, narration noting that a moment ago she was on her honeymoon on a tropical beach, but now deafening explosions rock the surroundings. Instinctively, she pulls against her restraints, finding them lacking, and struggles free. That's why you always tip your bellhop. On a 2-page spread, she finds herself on a hover platform in some kind of metallic-looking structure that's really difficult to describe. I'd cite H.R. Geiger if I was more familiar with his work. It's the strangest place Grey has ever seen, which, narration notes, is really saying something given she's been across the universe and back. However, it also notes that nothing she's experienced has prepared her for the journey ahead. Jean really should have paid the extra $20 for the expansion pack DLC. Nearby, we can see some people who appear to be dead, and one person's head on fire. Oh good, Ghost Rider's here to help her out. She sees a stranger that appears to be alive, but hanging from a cord and about to fall into the fiery pit below. She attempts to reach out telepathically to move him to safety. Pretty sure she meant telekinetically, but her powers don't seem to be working, so she has to do it the old-fashioned way, a hearty leap, which is done in a very visually interesting way, with black and white silhouettes. Hank McCoy, wherever you are, I hope you're smiling.
As Archimedes said when he discovered the principle of displacement, Eureka.
The instant she grabs the man's arm, now that the big metal thing has suddenly disappeared, she realizes it's Scott. As to where they are, a splash page shows us the exterior of the structure. Narration explains that it's the Ascani Cloisters, built about 50 years previous as a challenge to Apocalypse's long rule of the planet, and is now under attack, which apparently is not a big deal to the citizenry below. Also, it's 2,000 years in the future. Man, Hulu's revival of Futurama got really dark. Despite lacking mutant powers, their psionic rapport remains intact, presumably because whoever is behind their body swap filled their new forms with their essence, which have had a deep connection long before their wedding. Which is weird, since you'd think at least one of them would need telepathy for a psionic bond to work. Anyway, a platoon of Apocalypse's enforcers blast their way in, preparing to kill all inside now that they've found the child. His name is Grogu, and the Mandalorian is going to have your head on a platter for kidnapping his boy. Even though everyone appears dead already, the lead goon suggests decorating the city forum with their corpses as a sign to the remaining humans that the Ascani clan they had hope in is finally gone.
Can't one dinner go by where we don't talk about your rotting corpse?
Sorry.
When Scott and Jean are detected hiding in the rafters, the leader charges his hand with energy, planning on interrogating them for any lingering clan secrets. But he's exploded by a woman reportedly dead from the first wave of attacks. She offers them a chance to retreat with their lives, but since they opt to attack her, she decides to take them all out at once. For though there was a time I could easily disarm you with but a thought, the years have robbed me of my ability to be subtle. Incidentally, that's also what the critics said about my Netflix stand-up special. It's revealed that Mother Ascani is actually an elderly Rachel Summers, the aforementioned daughter from an alternate timeline. She's about to get her parents somewhere safe when she's ensnared by a psionic cocoon, which looks a lot more like pink bubblegum. Are we sure she's not getting absorbed by Majin Buu? She tells Jean and Scott to stay back while she's attacked by Javert, a much stronger henchman that pontificates on how she tricked the soldiers that supposedly killed her, and how, after caring for mutants, humans, and even androids, her religious order is at its end. Jean confronts the villain despite the odds against her, while Scott hangs back to cover her. After they trade barbs, he scans her with what seems to be cerebrotech, and finds that she's human, much to Mrs. Summers' surprise, that her daughter put them in new bodies, sans powers, as she's punched in the face. Hey, they were the last two on the shelf, the store was closing, you get what you get. Scott shows up, snarking about how underestimating one's opponent is a sign of poor upbringing, which is taken a lot more seriously by the despotic devotee. Though he gets knocked back a ways, Cyclops snags an energy rifle and fires at Javert for ambushing his daughter. With him out of commission for now, Rachel tells her folks what the narrator told us more than 10 pages ago, that they're 2 millennia in the future, and that the Ascani risked everything to bring them here. And that she figured they wouldn't mind, because I guess she's got some snark left in her. Also, she didn't mind calling her mom child, because I guess being grandma-aged makes that all involuntary. She leads them through a portal that sends them what seems to be a mile downward into the bowels of the cloister. With all the blood pouring in, it's as if the complex itself is alive. But no, it's just the blood of the Ascani killed in the massacre, sacrificing themselves for a greater cause. Keep that to yourself, though. I'm listing this place on Zillow, and I'm hoping they don't notice so I can get a decent price on it. Not expecting to last much longer, she psychically shows them Apocalypse in his current vessel, one alleged to be more female in appearance, though I don't much see it. Moving on. Pocky's finally conquered the planet, with groups of savage mutants out to kill humanity, which at this point encompasses any life deemed weak, and can be targeted at any time for any reason. After attending Scott and Jean's wedding, Rachel saved Captain Britain, who was lost in the time stream, and ended up in this dystopia about 100 years back. The Phoenix Force left her old and frail body 8 decades ago, allegedly for a stronger host, but she retains some remnants that are still pretty powerful. Weird. She was still a young woman around this time, so after 20 years, when she wouldn't even be 50, the Phoenix just up and left her? If it was instead after 80 years and Rachel was just getting on in age, that'd make more sense. And even weirder is that she guesses the Firebird left for a younger body after she claimed to be its final vessel. Before En Sabanor's current rule, there was unprecedented peace known as the Age of Xavier, all races getting along. Apocalypse used this peace against an unsuspecting, trusting planet. Somehow. And by the time Rachel arrived, people's will had suffered immensely. So she started the clan Ascani, translated in the current language as Family of Outsiders, and was the closest sounding thing to X-Men she could think of. So the thing that sounded the most like X-Men to her was a made-up word that didn't really sound like X-Men at all.
I thought you lived at a school.
In her time caring for the sick, Rachel noticed Pocky was changing up his look every few years, spending less time in each new form, likely burning them out. Ironically, the guy who preached survival of the fittest was having trouble finding a body to contain his power. But that changed when the perfect vessel arrived, Nathan Christopher Summers, who'd been sent to the future to treat his techno-organic virus in the pages of X Factor. Unable to do much against the infection, Rach had a backup plan. A clone, virus-free, that would help her fight Apocalypse when he came looking for the child. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. The clone went all evil, got himself some shiny armor, including a mask modeled after Wolverine's but way spikier. You know how it goes. The baby Nathan is with Boke, a Syntheon, basically an android, who's taking him to a safe house. Without the Phoenix Force, Rachel figures she hasn't got much time left, so uses some of what she has left to give Scott and Jean's current vessels their original powers, expositing that the bodies they're in were cloned from the DNA of their descendants, so genetically similar to them. Their original bodies would not have survived the time jump, but will be available again after Nathan defeats Apocalypse. Help a baby defeat a millennia-old, superpowered, eugenics-happy despot. Sure thing, no problem. Rachel falls unconscious, not dead, but in a coma, like Duke from the G.I. Joe movie, and Jean's maternal instincts kick in, not wanting things to end this way after she'd recently reconciled with her daughter. We then get a flashback to the Summers' honeymoon, specifically the moment a handful of Ascani sisters reached out through time to Jean and Scott through their rapport. Rather than think about what happened to their bodies, their minds and souls removed on the shore of St. Bart's, they move on, narration noting Scott's assurance in his and Jean's love seeing them through. Finding a drain leading outside, they get a better perspective of their situation. Alien-like structures, not unlike the one they're in. Everyone they've known and loved, dead. It's like they're on another world, and at least the one that hated and feared them was theirs. Scott replies that their love hasn't changed, and that's enough to fight for on any world. And when we get back, I bet we can turn this into a sci-fi romance novel to be adapted to film. We could make some serious bank! The two hide as Javert arrives with some backup, announcing that if the humans surrender now, they might have the glory of being personally killed by Apocalypse himself. Ruling over the devastated wasteland of a planet where your minions do most of your killing for you comes with a surprising amount of paperwork. It must be made clear to all that their grim ruler has outlasted the Ascani, like the other factions before them, but the goons aren't picking up the cerebral implants they were tracking, figuring they've been psychically blocked. Since Mother Ascani would be too weak, and the two foes were scanned as human, Javert rules that out, unaware Jean is indeed masking their presence. But he's still losing his patience, so has the child brought out to exchange for Rachel. While Scott can't see from their hiding spot if it's Nathan the cyborg is offering, he does mention the boy was taken from a synth-con that was friends with the Ascani supporters, and should be considered significant, which is evidence enough. If not, we get a close-up of the human baby affected by the techno-organic virus, which comes with a skosh of body horror. This is why vaccinations are important, people. With this confirmation, and both husband and wife aware they're being baited into a trap, Jean suggests they go on 3. Instead, Scott tells her to take Rachel, give him a telekinetic lift into the air, and leave. She obliges all but that last one, with Cyke surprising the goons from above. He surprises Javert with a point-blank range optic blast. Fortunately, Nate had already been handed over to an underling, whom Papa dispatches as well after retrieving his son. And I think it's a nice moment that the lad recognizes his father. As Jean opens the drainage pipes to flood the chamber, she and Scott have some snappy banter about the word obey taken from their wedding vows, and how they shouldn't fight in front of the children. Awful mellow given the circumstances. After a half hour, the water has died down, and Javert is still hanging on, vowing that whoever that man and woman are, this is not over, because cliché dialogue is one of the few things that have survived after 2,000 years. 20 miles away, Scott made it to shore with Nathan, who managed to sleep through the whole thing. Kid couldn't make it through the night in the most comfortable crib I could find. What gives? Fortunately, thanks to their rapport, Jean managed to keep herself and still comatose Rachel telekinetically tethered to him, so they weren't separated. With their future elderly daughter's mind seeming to be inactive, the issue ends on the pair bracing themselves to raise Nathan, take down Apocalypse, and free everyone enslaved. If we accomplish even half of that, I'd say we had a pretty productive honeymoon. Especially if we do it before Nate goes to college. I hear Apocalypse University is an overpriced party school. But it's the only one left on Earth, and no son of mine is going to Shiar A&M. This first issue wasn't a bad start to the miniseries, but it's particularly wordy. Lobdell uses a lot of dramatic flourishes that cause dialogue to drag on longer than I think it should, and there are moments where the narration tells us something that the characters end up explaining themselves, making it seem unnecessary. Maybe it's just a page later, like Scott's faith in his and Jean's love, or maybe almost halfway through the book, like how the two have been transported into the far future. Feels like we could have had one or the other to be more concise. Though, for the most part, narration was fine and even contributed to the overall atmosphere or mood in a given scene. There are several helpful editor's notes referencing ongoings relevant to these events, so it's very much a story that can leave someone in the dark if they weren't getting certain X titles at the time. Tune in next week to see how the newlyweds fare raising a child in a devastated future, and what costume they get him for his first trick-or-treating. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.